Happy Wednesday! That's right, today's subject is Winnie the Pooh, with the emphasis on the wonderful music and all the songs created by the Sherman Brothers for Walt Disney's original featurettes. And I'll let you in on a little secret. We're going to have a Sherman Brothers surprise at the end of the video, so be sure and stay tuned for that small smackroll of Sherman. As you can see, I have the compilation album, Walt Disney's Happiest Songs, right here. You might recall me talking about this in a previous video about the Disney compilation albums. Check out that video if you haven't seen it. And I'm displaying this album again because who do we have way over here? A very small bear. In fact, you could say a bear of very small brain, Winnie the Pooh himself. This album came out in 1967, and Walt Disney's first Pooh featurette, Winnie the Pooh and the Honey Tree, was released in February of 1966. Of course he was going to be featured on this album, because the songs from Winnie the Pooh are so wonderful. One album I definitely wanted to display for you is all the songs from Walt Disney's Winnie the Pooh and the Honey Tree. And I know I have that album around here someplace, but I just couldn't put my hands on it in time for this video.
Oh, bother.
But it's really a terrific album. First of all, the cover. The art is so wonderful. I love the style and how beautifully done it is. This wonderful pose of Pooh holding the bee, and it looks like the other characters are trying to warn him that might not be the wisest thing to do. And on the back, we have this wonderful line drawing, really inspired by one of Ernest Shepard's illustrations from the original A.A. Milne books. And here we can see, as was often done with the early Winnie the Pooh art produced by Disney, Tigger and Piglet are featured, even though they were not in the first featurette. But as stated, this wonderful album features all the songs from Winnie the Pooh, including the first version of Mind Over Matter, which is not even heard in the completed film. Now, it's remarkable that this album was released in spring of 1965, so almost a year before the featurette itself was in theaters. And perhaps for that reason, this is not a soundtrack album, even though it's often described that way. These are different versions of the Sherman Brothers songs than you hear in the film, with arrangements by Camarata, and not the arrangements heard in the film, which were done by Buddy Baker. And they are delightful in their own right. They're really a wonderful listen. Now, issued at the same time is this album that includes an illustrated storybook with some really sweet illustrations. And it has Sebastian Cabot's narration and some dialogue from the film, and additional Sebastian Cabot narration, including this little poem. This album is an interesting amalgamation of the film soundtrack, newly recorded material, especially Sebastian Cabot's narration, and the songs that are heard on all the songs from Walt Disney's Winnie the Pooh and the Honey Tree album. It's quite a hodgepodge, but it's very well done, and just a delightful listen. One fascinating thing about Winnie the Pooh and the Sherman Brothers is that unlike any other Disney project that they worked on, they did not get Winnie the Pooh at first. They've told that story many times. They've told it to me when I've interviewed them. They read the books, and there was something about the whimsy, the British charm, and the British dry wit that just didn't connect with them. So this was 1963. Walt had bought the rights to both the books and the illustrations because he directed his animation staff to emulate the look of the Shepard drawings. And in 1963, what was being produced was Mary Poppins, who was the costume design consultant on the film, but Tony Walton, who was married to Julie Andrews at the time. So Richard and Robert said to themselves, they're talking to each other, so not really to themselves. Richard and Robert thought, well, Tony Walton grew up in England. Perhaps he is familiar with the Winnie the Pooh stories and could shed some light on the appeal of these stories. So they asked Tony Walton if he had ever read the Winnie the Pooh stories, and he said something to the effect of, "Oh my gosh, Winnie the Pooh saved my life." And Tony went on to say that he had been a very pudgy child, and when he read the Winnie the Pooh stories, he saw that Pooh was someone who was very, very comfortable with who he was, and he made no apologies to anyone about who he was. And since Winnie the Pooh himself is, as the Sherman brothers put it in their song, "Up, down, touch the ground," he was stout, fat, and proud of that. That gave Tony himself the confidence to just be who he was and not mind what other people thought. So this insight into the personality of Pooh was the magic key that opened the door to the 100-Acre Wood for Richard and Robert. And the first song they wrote was the beautiful Winnie the Pooh theme song that opens the film and introduces the main characters, especially Winnie the Pooh himself, to the audience. So I have to show to you the collection of Winnie the Pooh and the house at Pooh Corner, and this is called The World of Pooh. The original books had been written in the 1920s. This was issued in 1957, and what made it special, as you can see here on the cover, is this edition featured new color illustrations in addition to the classic ones in black and white, pen and ink, by E.H. Shepard. So he did a new version of that map. It really looks so much like the one in the film. There's also these wonderful watercolor paintings that were added in. So it makes it a very special volume. There's a delightful one. They're all delightful. And in fact, The World of Pooh is one of the books that you can see on the bookshelf in Christopher Robin's room in the live-action title sequence of Winnie the Pooh and the Honey Tree. And we see throughout, of course, the original pen and ink drawings that are so wonderful, so much a part of the world of Pooh, and that the Disney artists, under Walt's direction, tried to emulate in both the characters and the backgrounds. But of course, they were made into a design that was animatable and had the Disney touch. Here's Christopher Robin. No, not that Christopher Robin. This Christopher Robin.
Really old bear.
Walt Disney had originally planned on making a feature of Winnie the Pooh, but as work proceeded, he decided that the characters, even though they were known in the United States, they were not that well known. He felt that releasing the stories in featurette form would introduce the characters to the American public more gradually and would position them or platform them, and that the original featurettes could then be put into feature form at some point. So he was certainly proved right, because the first film was very, very popular, but the follow-up was absolutely a smash hit. And even though it was released in 1968, and Walt had died in 1966, Walt was completely involved with the story development and the songs. And that had all been okayed by him before the film actually went into production in 1967. And of course, there was a record album for Winnie the Pooh and the Blustery Day. Again, we have a storybook inside with even more elaborate illustrations. And it's a good thing this is not called All the Songs from Walt Disney's Winnie the Pooh and the Blustery Day, even though the Heffalumps and Woozles are shown in the telling of the story here. That song is not on the album for whatever reason, which is too bad because it's such a great song, as all of them are. Winnie the Pooh and the Blustery Day is particularly noted for introducing, first of all, Piglet. And here he is in that earlier design. And also, most popular of all, Tigger. And it's fun to look at this earlier design of Tigger, where he's very toothy and has kind of a lion's mane almost. I just love that grin on him. But of course, the Tigger that we see in the animated featurette is so beautifully designed as he was by Milt Kahl, the great animation master. So sure enough, Walt was right, And Winnie the Pooh and the Blustery Day even won the Oscar as Best Cartoon Short of the Year. Tigger was so popular that in 1974, another featurette was produced, this time called Winnie the Pooh and Tigger 2. Yes, he even made it into the title, second only to Winnie the Pooh himself. Now, this album, in terms of its illustrations, is really beautifully done, as you can see by the cover here. This time, the illustrations are a direct reflection of what we see on the screen. And I find that most satisfying. As the illustrations indicated, this third album is probably the most beautifully produced record of the three. And again, reflecting that quality, this one was nominated for a Grammy Award. Now, when I started this video, I promised I was going to show you a Sherman Brothers surprise. And here it is. Let me just place this up here so you can see it, although I don't think you'll have a problem seeing it. It's quite large. Many of you are saying, what in the world is that? Well, as mentioned, Walt Disney's plan was to combine the three featurettes into a feature-length film, and that was done in 1977, and it was called The Many Adventures of Winnie the Pooh. That feature was released on home video. It was available not only as a separate VHS cassette, but also in this deluxe edition, an exclusive limited edition set. So let's take a look inside. This was really very beautifully done, I thought. This special case, this special sheet was on the back that described all the contents, which I'll now show you. Here's also a little banner that was included across the front. And we have the movie itself, an additional cassette which contains the documentary, The Making of The Many Adventures of Winnie the Pooh, which is really well done. Probably should show the inside as well. A certificate of authenticity, so important to collectors, so that's lots of fun. It makes it feel very official. And this artist's portfolio. It includes some of the Shepard drawings from the books, Disney art inspired by them, a finished scene, and the 100-acre wood map that I mentioned earlier. So let's take a look at the actual art, these lithographs. This is kind of like an unboxing, isn't it? Even though this has already been opened years ago. The map, isn't this beautifully done? This is really quite a treasure. Concept art, storyboard art, and the finished scene. Now this big box, you almost might think, well, that's a big book, isn't it? Well, it's not a book, but there was a book included. And this is our Sherman Brothers surprise. This is The Many Adventures of Winnie the Pooh songbook. And it contains many, if not all, the songs from the three Winnie the Pooh featurettes in sheet music, and a nice introduction with some wonderful behind-the-scenes photos and art. Here's Richard and Robert with Walt Disney. Even a photo of A.A. Milne and his son, the real Christopher Robin Milne. And then delightfully, in the little introduction to each of the songs are the illustrations by E.H. Shepard. So, Mind Over Matter, Pooh and his honey pot. The wonderful thing about Tigger bouncing Eeyore. And then serving as the introductions are insights and memories from Richard and Robert Sherman about the writing of these wonderful songs. And I know that's true because I'm the one that interviewed them and wrote the introductions for this book. I'm very, very proud of this. I also wrote all the material, like the lithograph, the back of the box. But again, one of the several times that I interviewed Richard and Robert, and they gave me some wonderful, wonderful stories about the writing of these songs. So let's take a quick look and see if we can just mention a couple of them, because it turns out that this is very rare. So this is a book that many people have not seen or even know about. And it's got some really delicious, as Winnie the Pooh might say, insights and anecdotes. One thing that's from this opening introduction that I had mentioned is that the final word of approval on each Winnie the Pooh song was Walt Disney himself. Everyone was okayed by Walt, says Richard Sherman. Every single note and every word was okayed by Walt. In all, the Shermans composed 10 sparkling new songs for Winnie the Pooh. So, of that Winnie the Pooh theme song that is so famous, Richard says that was pure inspiration that came right from the heart. It was the first song we wrote for Pooh. After we reread the Milne books, we said, now let's enter the 100-acre wood. Robert Sherman added, we introduced all the different Pooh characters with that song. And the gentle theme song introduces not only Pooh's cast of captivating characters, this is the author speaking, that's me, but it also establishes the whimsical fantasy world of Pooh's enchanted neighborhood. Here's the one that I mentioned earlier, Up, Down, and Touch the Ground. Stout, fat, and proud of that, Pooh's perhaps the only person in the world who, as Robert Sherman puts it, exercises in order to gain weight. Pooh had a great sense of pride in who he was and what he was, said Richard Sherman. So we wrote Up, Down, and Touch the Ground as Pooh's statement of life. It's very beautifully set up, where you think Winnie the Pooh's going to be doing his exercises to lose weight, and in fact he uses it to increase his appetite. About rumbly and my tumbly. This, of course, is the song that Winnie the Pooh sings as he climbs the honey tree. So it was very fun to share this book that I wrote that is based on my interviews with Richard and Robert Sherman. It's really quite a treasure. But now, according to the Pooh Coo clock, it's time to say goodbye for now. I hope you liked this video, and if you did, please like. And don't forget to subscribe, as we have some wonderful videos coming up and you don't want to miss any of them. We'll see you next time, and don't forget, in that enchanted place at the top of the forest, the little boy and his bear will always be playing.